What if depression is really not depression? What if anxiety is not really anxiety? Meaning that these conditions that we have just been so entrained to think are mental or biochemical or neurochemical are actually not. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some people that have psychological depression and anxiety. There are some people that truly have a chemistry issue. But what if our understanding of these are actually partially inaccurate, meaning that we've only taken one part and made it whole, whereas there's actually a whole window of opportunity for us to understand things, and we're completely ignoring this. You see, one of the things that we fail to see right now is how everything in the body is connected to everything, and how everything influences everything, and how this thing that we call depression and anxiety may have nothing to do with this and everything to do with this, the body. And that's what I want to share with you, because there's a patient of mine. We'll say her name is Jasmine. We'll say she's 16. Again, as always, we change all of this to protect that identity of the person. But Jasmine came to see me with a little nudging from her mom because she had anxiety and depression that had been going on essentially her entire life. And she had been on medication for a few years, and it had helped her function better, but she really wasn't that happy with how she was doing. And her mom is like, come on, let's try something different. And we spent an hour talking, and during the course of this long conversation, a lot of interesting tidbits came up, which seemed unrelated. And certainly if you had gone to, or if they had gone to see a psychologist or psychiatrist or neurologist, they would have been like, oh, these things have no meaning to why you're depressed or anxious. But they had everything to do with why she was anxious and depressed. So what was it about her story that tipped me off? Well, Jasmine, one of the things that she was sharing with me was that she's never really an athlete. She was the indoor type of gal. She was the type that preferred to sit, really didn't exert herself. When she would exercise, she would tire easily. She just kind of felt run down all the time. And we just kept talking and talking and talking. And at the end of it, I looked at her and I said, you have a metabolic condition. And she's like, what? And you're probably like, what? And then you're probably doing like a double what? Like, what is a metabolic condition and what the hell does that have to do with being depressed, right? Well, think about it. Metabolic conditions, especially mitochondriopathies, so errors in our mitochondria, and our mitochondria are basically generators in each cell that we have. So we have trillions of little mitochondria, little generators that take fuel, food that we eat, and ultimately convert it to ATP, which is basically electricity. And electricity is what ultimately powers everything in our body. If you cannot produce electricity efficiently from the fuel you take in, and your batteries or your juice or your current, whatever you want to call it, is always at 50%, 60% best, how would you feel? Imagine you're driving your car and the lights are always dimming, the car half the time stalls. Wouldn't that be kind of like depression? And in the case of Jasmine, that was actually the case. She was depressed because metabolically her functioning, her genetic baseline functioning was so low that she never could produce enough efficient energy to actually feel good. And think about the times where you've been sick, for instance, and you're just so tired that you can't get out of bed. You're so tired you don't want to do anything. Think about that. That almost looks like depression, to the point where it actually can look like depression and be labeled as depression. What did we do for Jasmine? We gave her a metabolic support, so CoQ10, carnitine, B vitamins, blah, blah, blah. And I actually added some additional B vitamins because a lot of people that have depression also have methylation errors, where because they can't produce these methyl groups, and consider methyl groups as the oil for our brain. They lubricate the brain. They help all of the processes run more efficiently. So I basically helped supercharge her oil and helped juice the energy up. And you know what happened? About 2 months later, Jasmine came back and the mom's like, yeah, she's happier. She's got more energy. She's going out more. She's smiling more. She feels better. And I was like, oh, cool. But that wasn't the end of the story, because I wish it was as simple as like, oh, all depression is metabolic issue, fix this. And that's not the case. Once we took that layer off, the next piece of the conversation that came up is like, yeah, Jasmine every now and then gets stomach pains or stomach discomfort and things are just not right. We bypassed the testing. We didn't do any of that for cost and other reasons. And I just said, you know what? For a month, are you down to just get rid of gluten and dairy? The two most inflammatory foods that we eat. Very unhappily, let's say, the 16-year-old agreed to give up gluten and dairy for a month. And guess what? Stomach issues went away. And ultimately, she started to be feeling even better. She felt lighter. She was happier because inflammation actually mucks up metabolic functioning. And inflammation directly can affect the brain and actually distorts part of our biochemistry within the brain. So certain like serotonin pathways, other pathways actually get messed up and they don't function appropriately. And if you're curious, there's actually a term called atypical depression. So if you type in atypical depression, inflammation, you'll see tons of articles come up about how inflammation can cause an odd state of atypical depression. Psychologists don't talk about this. Psychiatrists certainly don't look at this, and neurologists haven't been trained to look at this, except it's there. It's in the scientific literature. When we got rid of Jasmine's gut inflammation and we brought that down, we had addressed her metabolic functioning. Now we addressed her inflammation. She felt markedly better. One of the final times that she came to see me, we were talking, and she's like, God, I feel really good, but I'm dreading the fact that I have to go back to school. I'm like, why? Why? Why would you be afraid of or dreading going back to school? She's like, I hate being in the classroom. It's just so chaotic and loud. I was like, oh, tell me more. We started talking, and it turns out that every time Jasmine goes into a loud, crowded space, she shuts down. She gets overwhelmed. 16-year-old shuts down, can't function. I looked at her, I'm like, you have a sensory processing disorder. What the hell is that? Sensory processing disorders, which affect 1 in 4 of you, 1 in 4 of us, sometimes mild, sometimes severe, is basically where the brain is not wired properly to take in the information from our ears, our eyes, or our other senses. This causes a state where we literally cannot function or we cannot handle the sensory input that comes in because most normal people can shut out extra sounds. You could be in a loud, crowded space talking to one person, hearing the one person, shutting everything else out. Jasmine can't do that. Jasmine takes in sound from everywhere. Everyone is talking at the same time and her brain is flooded with all this noise. And of course, what happens an hour or two later? She can't handle it. She wants to get out. At the age of 16, we sent Jasmine to a therapist to start working on rewiring her brain so she could actually handle the sensory input. And if you go and read, there are highly sensitive people. Guess what? These highly sensitive people, most of them have sensory processing disorders that have been overlooked. Jasmine was one of them. With that and with all of these other pieces, Jasmine is now a different person. She can function. She's happy. She's not depressed. She's not anxious. Because we addressed the root causes of her issues. And it wasn't just fix the gut, everything gets better, or fix this, everything gets better. We understood what was causing her to suffer. We addressed the issues that were relevant to her. And we opened the world up for her to enjoy. And this is what I want to give you. I want everyone that is suffering out there to start being able to see these pieces for themselves. Because it's like a jigsaw puzzle. For every one of us, there are different pieces that matter. And if we can see what are the pieces that matter for you, that matter for your child, then we can create the same outcome that we were to do for Jasmine. Thank you for listening. It's Dr. K from Holistic Minds.